I'll start off at 9. It gets to be a little bit after that by the time people tune in, and we aim to be finished in an hour and 15 minutes. So by 10:15, I understand if some people have to leave earlier, please be released to do that. But as I said, glad that you were able to start off with us now. And just going to start off with praying for us, and then I'm going to hand it over to Paul, who's going to share a little bit of story with us. And then I will hand it over to Adam, who is going to be taking us through a panel discussion on friendship with others. And so good. So let's just pray. Father, Lord, we are grateful, Lord, that we can come humbly before you, Lord, because you are the one that gives us the life, the strength, the breath to do the things that we do. And we are grateful, Lord, as those who love you and part of this great movement of YWAM'ers to be able to serve in Canada, but also from there to the nations. So we just pray your blessing this morning, Father, on our discussion, Lord, that there would be space, Lord, for all of us to be able to hear as well as to share. In your name, amen. Amen. So good. Well, Mr. Paul Martinson, over to you.
Well, thank you, John. So the kind of the history behind this, we've been talking over the last several months that I've been asked the question, how did the islanders start coming to Canada? And there is a story behind it, and I thought it would be worth telling. The more I get into the story, I realize that we could go on for quite a while, especially if Mua and Vi and others who have been part of this movement in Canada chimed in and told some of their stories. So there's a lot that's happened over the years. So it started out in Cambridge, Ontario. Now, Cambridge doesn't even exist anymore, but at the time, it was the largest base in Canada. Uh, we're up to about 200 staff and 200 people, or with the schools and so forth at times. And it was a typical Saturday intercession time back in 1985. And we're just praying for ministries in Canada. So one of the neat things about YWAM, and I've studied a lot about this, but YWAM's ethos, or the kind of the background in YWAM, is really about sending and receiving. Just so much of what YWAM does is send from everywhere to everywhere. And that's how YWAM started. But how people are sent tends to be, uh, from a missiological perspective, tends to be a strategy that is developed at every base. So a location defines how they are sent. So the broader international vision, sending and receiving, kind of local, how do you do it? So we were doing a day of intercession, a whole day of intercession. We get 200 people broken up into groups, praying for different things, then reconvening, and then reporting in, and then scattering again to pray. And one of the groups came up with this, that we should be inviting Polynesian believers to Canada because of the redeeming culture strategy that was going on at that time, which is quite a powerful history in and of itself. This whole idea of redeeming cultures, and this, it fits into the apostolic vision of the early church, that as the gospel goes out and interacts with another culture, it is not creating a Jewish culture or even a sort of a pan Gentile culture. What happens locally is that you create a new branch of the Christian church. And so culture is really important. And then the challenge in missions is, how do you integrate your culture with the faith? So that's a big challenge. But some of the early thinkers on that in YWAM were Polynesians. So Seni, Liao, Kalafi, Mawala, Frank, Naya, others that were around were thinking like that, kind of linked up with the whole world Christian movement at the time, which was celebrating indigenous cultures worldwide. So there was a lot of that interface back in the 80s, 1980s. And that sort of is the background for that idea of let's invite Polynesians into Canada. Now, back in the 85, that we couldn't have sent out a Zoom, we couldn't have sent out an email, we couldn't have done anything like that. You had to go and personally invite. So Ralph Bromley was one of the initial uh, forays out from the Cambridge base, went out, interacted with New Zealand and Samoa and other places, inviting Polynesians to come to Canada. The very first person who showed up was Frank Naya, who at the time was simply a base director in northern New Zealand, and he led DTS, he and his wife, but he showed up in 1986 in Vancouver. And I remember I took him around to all the First Nations churches and that sort of thing. A funny story about Frank. He's a big, tall guy. At that time, he was relatively skinny, but he was tall and good looking and brown skin. And when he got up at the Pentecostal church in Vancouver, First Nations Pentecostal church, he started speaking and he had that soft Kiwi accent. And as soon as he started talking, everybody's heads just snapped around like, where's this guy from? Because he didn't talk native, but he sure looked native. And he just had everybody in the palm of his hand, just speaking out. He gave a good gospel presentation, just talked about his culture, cultural background. And in a sense, philoxenia that Dan's been talking about, Frank communicated that care for, love for the other. And it just opened up something. So he was the first person to take on the invitation, but then he sent teams, team after team after team. Vi and Julie, before they were married, came as part of one of those teams. So Vi is online. I'll introduce him a little bit later. But just the fact that they started coming. Just a little story about this. The very first team was all Cook Islanders and Maori and from New Zealand, and they showed up. We gave them a car. We didn't even give them driving lessons. We probably gave them a map and said, here's where you need to go. And they drove all the way up into the interior of BC, and for 6 weeks went from village to village doing evangelism. When they came back, we invited them over to our house. Now, these are all Kiwi or Kiwi background, and we invited them to our house for tea. Now, they came hungry
Business
for
economy,
dinner, but we were
yes.
thinking tea is tea. And
Entertainment.
Paul, you're muted.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
Oh, are you muted?
Paul, you're
no.
muted. Just
oh,
unmute yourself. There you go.
sorry, I'm talking away about story, and I wasn't even aware of that. Okay, so they invited them over for tea. They only got tea. We were so embarrassed, but we all then laughed about it. And then the next day we invited them for tea and gave them a proper meal. So we're learning. And that was the whole thing about that. And I would say one of the things that has been so wonderful about having Polynesians, and I think Vi would know the numbers, but I think we've got over 200 people that have come over the years, or more than that, to Canada and served. Now we've got Moo and Marie are still part of some of the early YWAM'ers there. Lima in Saskatchewan. Asa is from a little bit of a Fiji, but from a different group, and he connected. Issy is with Island Breeze in Manitoba. And so we've got islanders that are connected across Canada and serving in very significant ways. And it's quite a delight to have that. And we've learned so much. And I would say, as I said earlier, this whole idea of redeeming cultures, that is a huge missiological step forward. And it was really pioneered more by the Polynesians and other islanders that kind of initiated that sort of understanding of how to best serve the gospel. And we've learned so much from that. I mean, this issue of philoxenia, being friendship, but cross-culturally, the challenges that we've faced in that process, and just the different innovations that have taken place over the years. And so now with maybe what I'll do is introduce Vi, and Vi was a leader of several different kinds of ministry. Not Island Breeze, but I should say Island Breeze was also a significant contribution when the Anastasis was in Victoria for dry docking back around the same time. They were some of the initial forerunners working on the island, and I'm sure there's still history about remembering that. So let me introduce Vi, and maybe you could say a few words, and then I will stop. I'm wide open to talking more about this, but I wanted to be aware of my 12-minute slot I've got. So Vi, chime in.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if you can hear me, but
Yep, got you. That's good, Vi.
aloha.
You're looking good. Your beard's looking good. He's great. He and Julie came on an outreach team, and we hosted them around Vancouver. Peter and Donna were kind of at the same time thinking about moving to Canada, back to Canada. And so Vi and Julie were not married at the time, but now he's a grandpa. So he's in medicine out, I think, taking care of grandkids or seeing grandkids. So say hi, Vi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for letting me join the Canadian family here. It's been an honor. In fact, we're just working on writing this whole cross-cultural story, the marriage of the Indigenous family with our family in Canada. And just a few weeks ago, Julie and I were just sitting on our veranda in Hawaii and just began to thank the Lord for each of the fathers and mothers who helped in this cross-cultural marriage story of the islands and the First Nations and the Indigenous people of the North and the rest of our family in Canada. And so I wrote a bunch of things just to honor people like Paul, who was just an incredible father and who kind of brought us into that story with others like Ralph. Graham is here, who has been an incredible brother in that journey. Anyway, so I just wanted to say hi and say that we wouldn't have this story today without our Canadian family sort of, courting us as Polynesians into this journey together. And so, yeah, so we're in the process of putting a lot of this stuff in a book. But yeah, I just want to say that this story is incomplete without the rest of our Canadian and American family. Their family love and incredible covenant friendship towards us in that story has enabled us. And of course, many early converts such as Marie Va'a, and many others who came to the Lord earlier I believe it's 1987, 1988. A privilege to see a whole wave of young First Nations come to know Jesus, who are now great leaders and teachers and great image bearers of the King of Kings amongst their communities. And we've had others who came through the ministry, have been discipled, and both former and current chiefs of their own tribes. We've got kids who have represented Canada in professional level in rugby, and in the different spheres of influence even today, just out of that whole movement. So I just want to honor you all. Many of you are here, Moore and Issy and others who have carried on the torch. We've got Adam there. It's been a great brother, the Jordans, and many of you whom I don't know personally. We've got South African expression here in the house, and many of you. But just want to say to those of you whom I don't know personally, we've got heroes like Errol Martins, Paul Martinson, John West, Watson, who's been part of this great story through many years. I just want to honor you and say this whole story with Islanders and First Nations, Natives, Métis, and Inuit, of course, Eskimos on the side of the U.S. In that sense, would not have been, we've got Lima and others who are in Saskatchewan. It would not have been a great story today without, the rest of our family. Coming to New Zealand, where I was working at the time, and sort of really, in many ways, sort of said, hey, we actually want to get married to you, and would you consider, walking in a, sort of a dating relationship and courtship and into a full-blown marriage as a YWAM family, and then, of course, literal marriages today to many of the First Nations.
Great.
So yeah, we just want to honor you and say thank you. And Julie and I, have been privileged to be part of this story. The Jordans, Mama Donna have been part of that. Peter and Donna, and a successful story of missions with learning from many mistakes and challenges. So yeah, I just wanted to say hello and just honor you and bless you all for making room for a bunch of crazy Islanders and non-whites to be part of a great successful story of Canada that's now spread over to the US, in which I have been able to work with many tribes there at the moment. So yeah, thank
Great.
you.
Thank
And
you.
bless
Thank you, Vi. Really appreciate it. And good to see you, and bless you as you're visiting. And you're always welcome to be back or send teams or keep on doing things. So again, the story is complex, interesting, challenging. I would say one of the things that I have learned, or we have learned, is how important protocol and being ceremonially open to the others. And that's one of the things I think the Islanders have so much contributed to us, how to function in protocol, how to function in right relationships, how to keep those front and center in missions. I think that's enough, and I'm pushing on my time, so I want to stop right now and turn it back to you, John, and we'll carry on with the panel.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thank you, Paul. I'm going to hand it over to Adam, who's going to introduce the panel and the discussion for today. I first met Adam some years ago in YWAM Black Falls, and we've been able to keep in touch as he headed to Fiji. And we are blessed now to have him here on Vancouver Island in Victoria with his family, have been a blessing to the community. And I've just really appreciated being able to spend time with the team there in YWAM. Andy's on board here today, and with YWAM Victoria. So, Adam, to you, and thank you for helping to lead this discussion.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. It's good to see all your faces and hear your voices again. Hey, just a quick background in case you don't know some of my history. My mom is Woodland Cree, full-blooded Woodland Cree from Northwest Ontario. My dad was a white man, his with European descent, and so I'm Métis. And it's kind of funny when I went to Fiji, and they'd ask me about my family, and I'd tell them this. They'd go, "Oh, you're half caste." So the word that they'd use in Fiji was half caste, which I kind of like. So sometimes when I'm with people, I say, "Oh, I'm half caste." And when I was 2 years old, my mother decided that she wanted to return to her roots. So we moved into the forest, and I tease my full-blooded Cree friends that I'm more Cree than they are because I lived in a log cabin without running water, sewer, electricity. We ate beaver meat probably 4 nights a week. I grew up wearing mucklucks and eating moose and bear and coyote and kind of any animal you've seen in the forest, we've eaten. And so I tease my friend that I'm more native than they are. And I became a Christian when I was 17. And when I was 20, I moved south and I went to a Bible school in Winnipeg. And it was my first time being around so many white people. And I'll tell you, what a shock. Issy knows what I'm talking about. He's in Mennonite Central there. I was surrounded by white Mennonites, and everything was different. Their food was different. The jokes they laughed at were different. Sense of humor was different. Totally different culture. And it took me years, I'm serious, years and years and years to figure out how to live life in a white Christian community. It was really challenging. And so I often feel like I'm standing with one foot in my kind of native world and one foot in the white man's world. And so over in YWAM, I've learned how to celebrate both parts of my life, both parts of my heritage. And I'm excited for the people on the panel here because I know that they all live that same way, that they have one foot in the Indigenous world and one foot kind of in the YWAM world and in the white Christian community world. So we've got a great panel. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into, Dan had some amazing thoughts on relationships with First Nations communities and what it could look like and what the Bible says about it. And so we wanted to make it practical. And here's some testimonies, here's some stories about what that can look like in ministry, especially in the YWAM context. So I'm just going to introduce briefly. We've got Issy from Fiji, and he's leading Island Breeze Manitoba, based out of Steinbach, and he's surrounded by these white Mennonites I was talking about, who I have to say are fantastic people. They were really foreign to me, but they've become some of my favorites. And I don't know about you guys, but I can travel anywhere in the world and be talking to a missionary, and they'll all tell me that they have a really good missionary supporter from Manitoba. Those Mennonites in Manitoba must fund 99% of the missionaries around the world. Everybody has a supporter from Manitoba. Also, Mua from the island here, he's actually just down the road from us. He's one of the longest continually serving missionaries here on in First Nations in Canada, I think, for YWAM, continually serving. And then we got Billy, who's kind of a newer addition to YWAM Canada from South Africa. He's quite famous for leading nations to nations and celebrating the different nations. And then we also have, of course, Dan is on the call, and I'm hoping that he's going to be kind of pumping his fist and getting excited about some of the conversations we have. And I'm hoping that at any point he'll chime in and add some good theology or some thoughts to the conversation we're having. And I didn't realize that Vi was going to be on the call, but Vi was probably the person that opened my eyes to what First Nations ministry could look like. I had been in YWAM for about 4 or 5 years and living outside Medicine Hat, and invited Vi to go up to my community and to introduce him to where I grew up and the possibility of bringing some teams there. And as we were talking about bringing Vi and some of his guys up to my community, Vi said, the first thing we have to do is talk to the chief. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Nobody does that. Like, you usually just go into the community and start doing stuff. And he says, no, we have to go to the chief. And so I remember calling the chief of the tribe up there and making an appointment and going to the band office. And most of the band council members were there, the elders were there, and Vi came in and did his Samoan protocol and honored the people and asked permission to come in. And I think he was the very first missionary in 200 years to ask permission to come into the community. And as Vi was doing protocol and telling his stories, I was kind of at the back of the room looking around, and I saw elders kind of dabbing their eyes and crying a little bit and laughing and laughing and laughing. And at the end of a couple of hours of sharing stories and giving gifts and doing protocol, the chief and all the elders said, "You are welcome in our community." And then for the next week, they took us around to all the schools. They took us around to all their different band offices and the different communities and the different reserves, and treated us like royalty. Wide open doors, shared food. I remember that when we left there, we had trouble fitting all of the gifts into our van. They gave Vi and the team paddles and bags of wild rice and carvings and um, beaver pelts. And I thought, wow, I have never seen a welcome like this before. But it was simply that Vi came in differently than 200 years of white missionaries. And I began when I went to Fiji, I saw the importance of protocol, especially in an indigenous culture. And so now I understand why Pacific Islanders especially do so well in Canada, simply because they understand the importance, the cultural importance of honor, respect, coming in with humility, and coming in to serve the people. So I'm quite excited to have some of these guys share some stories. So I want to do less talking here and ask our panel members. Actually, this is a question that I didn't message you, but I'd be very curious to know what your opinion was of the First Nations people in Canada before you started ministry. I'm curious, what were your expectations? What in your home culture, what did you know of Indigenous people in Canada? What did you think of them before you came? So Issy, Billy, Mua, yeah, Vi, you're on the call too. If any of you want to chime in, I'd be very curious to know what your thoughts were before you came to Canada and started this ministry. Whoever's ready, just unmute yourself and jump in there and share a quick story about what your culture, what your country thought of Indigenous people in Canada.
All right, I'll start it. The question, I think, for me, what do I know and my experience and what my first thought of as a kid growing up in the village, I used to love to go watch Western movie. And this whole cowboys and Indian things back in the day. And I've always thought like the Western movie, always a good guy is a white guy, and the bad guy is a native. But I developed very interesting more of that because there's a warrior spirit that always been a warrior. So as a kid, we hardly find a cowboy. We always want to be a native Indian because that's a sort of a kind of get in us about hey. So we will try to find someone to play cowboy, but nobody else want to play. So my experience of that is that my thought of native, but there are people that are warriors. They're a fighter. Um, they don't back down in any. I know this is probably just the Hollywood stuff. Um, but that's my experience. So I thought about when I went to YWAM, it just never dropped off my mind that one day I will marry one of them and live a life. I found that still today that determination and have the strong passions. We're working with our people in our community. It's that experience I still have with me today.
That's really cool. Really cool. Billy, I'm quite curious in South Africa, growing up, did you have any concept of First Nations in Canada? Was that in the culture at all?
Hey, Adam. Not so much Canada. I think it was more Americanized. Also, lot on TV about the cowboys and the Indians, and of course that spilled over to our community where we would play games or like act like that we are cowboys and Indians. And I know the guys that was the cowboys were always the guys with the guns, and the Indians would run away. So it was more like the movies that we saw, that the Indians would always be the weaker ones. So yeah, it was more on movies that we kind of imagine what it would look like in this context.
Okay. You see, I'm curious about you. You know what? The very first time I went to Fiji, I walked out of the airport and there was a guy standing there, and he looked at me and he says, hey, Bula, talked to me, and he says, hey, are you Red Indian? Because in Fiji, half the country is Indian, East Indian. And he took one look at me and said, "Are you Red Indian?" And it's not a bad thing there. It's just what they call First Nations in Canada. And I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And he shook my hand and wanted to ask me all these questions about being from Native in Canada. And then I went to the grocery store a few months later, and there's usually an aisle of Hindu worship products like incense and little burners and stuff because there's so many Hindus in the country. And I saw they got really modern. Instead of burning incense, you can buy it in an aerosol can, like a Febreze, but it's incense. And there's one, it said money blessings, and on it was a First Nations chief from Canada with like a full headdress. And so you could go buy this First Nations money blessings aerosol incense to spray in the house. I think Issy has some on the shelf behind him there. But yeah, I'm curious, Issy, what did you think of First Nations people before you came to Canada? Do you remember ever seeing anything about them or learning anything about them?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Morning, everybody. Just quickly want to honor the people that are sitting here, those of you who have more white hair than me, for laying the foundation for us to come and stand on it. Just discovering the open doors that we have. If it wasn't for your prayers, your sweat, and your tears. And yeah, I just want to say, as much as we're honoring Islanders, I mean, as Vaya mentioned, just like a marriage, we do get things wrong. And so thank you for your patience and your understanding to allow us to correct the mistakes and to keep us in this awesome mission, keep us paddling our canoes. Yeah, so exactly what Vi mentioned, like we wouldn't be where we're at without your support. So thank you to all of you sitting here, Paul. Those that I know is Paul, Errol, John, Auntie Donna, Vi, Movai. So yeah, Graham, thank you. Yeah, exactly what everybody has mentioned. Where we had kids, we played cowboys and Red Indians. Everybody wanted to be a Red Indian, at least from my experience, is because we could actually create a bow and arrow. Like we couldn't recreate a gun, so we could actually like bend some bow and arrow and actually shoot other kids with the bow and arrow. So that's a good thing to have. My school, I went to a very prominent boys primary school, high school. I don't know why, but we would call ourselves the Redskins, and then we actually have the full chief or like every time when we go out. So that was that was my experience before coming to Canada.
Yeah. Thank you, Vinaka.
I got
Dan, how is your reception? Are you picking us up okay all the way over in Senegal, Africa?
Yeah, just fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you great. I'm curious what your experience was growing up. What was your family or where you grew up? What was kind of the thoughts around First Nations people?
Yeah, no, my parents are both from England. So we grew up as kids though in Canada. I grew up specifically in Ottawa. And for whatever reason, there was a short period of time where the Ottawa School Board in the early 90s wanted to do a lot to help connect just the different schools to Indigenous communities nearby. And so I remember growing up and going to a few different powwows when I was a kid, and just thinking this was the best thing ever. So whenever we played Cowboys and Indians, we always wanted to be the Indians. We had a I had a friend of mine, he was a friend of my brother and my sister's as well. He lived a few doors down from us. So he was a Mohawk guy and he became good friends of ours as well. So we'd hang out with him a lot and play. So it didn't seem abnormal for me or anything like that to kind of hang around it. I was very interested in the culture, and whenever we'd hang out with Ian, was his name, he would kind of show us around a little bit and kind of explain to us things. So that was really helpful to have some friends like that from a young age. But my community I grew up in though was largely white. I think probably Ian would have been one of the only Indigenous people that I can think back to that I would remember seeing around my community. It was mostly like white Francophone or white Anglophone communities in the Ottawa area. So that was a kind of a little bit my growing up experience. But then of course, like growing up in Canada, there's all kinds of stereotypes that you would grow up hearing. And so that definitely played into things too. So you'd hear certain kinds of stereotypes coming through about, Native communities getting free taxes and, not participating in things, or it was never stereotypes painted in a positive way. But thankfully, at least we had, some really positive experiences and relationships that we could kind of compare those to and say, oh, something's not completely checking out here. But that was kind of, I think, probably more the common experience of other friends of mine too that grew up in the same area.
Yeah. Vi, I'm curious if you grew up in Samoa watching the same cowboy and Indian movies as Mua, or did you have a different experience thinking about First Nations?
I grew up in the bush, so we had no TV, so I never got to see the Indian and Cowboys thing.
Oh, okay.
But that the way we see the world is reality is ordered in the supernatural first, and then symbolically, and then maybe materially in terms of the scientific material world. And so, my dad, who was the chief, taught us and had us immersed in that world, which I found later that it's the same with the natives. And so what that means practically is that because, the world is spiritual first, manifested through creation and through people and all these other manifestations, we then have to respect and honor. So when we go to another village, we do not even cross their territory without considering honoring them and asking for their permission to come in. So I did the same thing when I went to New Zealand. I went to the local, Maori tribe and asked them for their blessing for me to even be there in New Zealand. And a lot of people were looking at me like, why do you need to do that? After all, these facilities that you're in are actually bought out by the whites, and it's actually theirs. And I totally honor that as well. It's theirs, but because of the reality spiritually of the indigenous people and the land, we were taught that, like, when it's the same thing when we go to Fiji, we have to even consider asking for permission and honoring the manifestation of the spiritual realm in that nation. So when I came to Canada, protocol is not just something to get us a favor to get in. It's how we see the world. That without such permission and such blessing, then we know that the spiritual realm will not cooperate with us. And I know that goes into all these other issues and theological stuff that we can have great discussions about, but both in the good and the bad. But so when I came to Canada, I never even seen an Indian. When Paul Martinson and Ralph came to New Zealand and said, hey, we cannot even penetrate the reservations. I want to challenge you to jump on a different canoe and come to North America. I knew that, and Moore and Isi, I mean, they are amazing. And Lima, they are incredible practitioner of that story today. I mean, they've opened doors to reservations because of, just that worldview. And I just want to say, so when I came here, I knew, first of all, I've had to ask my white brothers for their blessing to work with YWAM here, and also to even land in Vancouver. And then I knew that the people of the land, I have to go ask for their permission wherever we go. So I first encounter what we were taught in a modern day school as the Red Indians. I first encountered them in Canada. I'd never seen them before, but I knew whatever they look like, because I grew up in a village with no running water, no television. Never saw a white man till I was 17 in high school, in 2 hours bus drive away from the village. So whatever they look like, I knew I had to ask for permission. And even if they say no, then that's a no. I have to wait. And to God's glory, so many doors open up, and great people like we have today, you guys. And like Izzy said, it's a weird dynamic, but we wouldn't have been able to walk that story without the rest of our Canadian family. So yeah, so that was my impression of natives. I didn't know anything about natives, but I knew whatever they look like before I stepped into a territory, the land that the Creator covenanted with them. I will not violate those spiritual boundaries and those manifestation of the spiritual realm without their permission. Yeah. So that's how it began that way. It wasn't anything special, or to this day.
Yeah, fantastic. The Cree where I grew up have a story about when God made humans. He made them in the kitchen, and he cut them all out, and he put them in the oven, and the first batch came out, and they were all white. And God looked and said, "Oh, not cooked long enough." So he made another batch of humans, put them in the oven, cooked them longer, took them out, they're all black. It's, oh, too much. And then he did one more time, made humans, pulled them out of the oven. They were just a nice light brown color. And he says, that's perfect. And that's how he made the First Nations. Issy, I did want to spend a few minutes and talk about going into First Nations communities, because as YWAM, we lead teams. We do a lot of short-term teams. So I want to talk about that for a few minutes. And I know, Issy, you probably lead more people into First Nations communities right now than anybody else. I'd like to ask you about how you plan to go into a community, like especially for the first time. What does that look like? And then Vi, I'd like to, in a moment, ask you what it's like to receive teams, because you're long-term in one First Nations community and you've received different teams over the years. So Issy, could you talk to us a little bit about how you go in? Like, what do you do before you go into a community? Even who do you talk to in a community? How do you plan? Give us some tips. I know a lot of people here probably have pens and paper and they're looking for some hints, like a to-do list. Like, what's the to-do list before we go in? What does it look like? And then Mua, you can be thinking about receiving teams, that had some do's and don'ts and what's been done well and what your advice is. So Issy, tell us a little bit about what it looks like when you go into a community.
Okay, thanks, Adam. I think it's been highlighted already exactly what VIA does. I don't know if that's just a part of culture, but I also remember just Paul encouraging the whole process of protocol. And us as a location, when we began a couple of years ago, we thought that we wouldn't come on Turtle Island without the invitation from the different authorities. So we actually had Paul there. We had some First Nations, Métis, Inuit representation to welcome us on October 22nd, 2009. So I thought that was a very important start for us as a YWAM location. So we valued protocol. And then from then on, it was, we have some very good advisors and directors now behind us. And one of them would always be able to articulate our action. And what he realized was that, we connect with the church, nothing wrong with the church. But you would imagine that the pastor of the church has that authority just over the church. But then if you're able to approach the chief has been given the blessing, the authority over the community. So if you're able to tag on to the chief, honor him and protocol and just say you're here to bring some gifts, that has always been our approach. And nothing more than that. If he gives us the open doors to be able to do things, then we say, awesome, we do it. I remember our first trip to Saging, close by over here. We went, and this is where YWAM comes in handy too, because a lot of us didn't know that we could hear the voice of God. And until YWAM, we realized that we could hear the voice of God. So prayed and asked what was it that we were supposed to do, and it was we heard very clearly, a few of us, that nothing. We were supposed to do nothing. We were just there to sit by the fire, eat bannock, and that was it. And so a lot of us that has been in tune to the whole idea of missions, to do an open air, sing some songs, save some people, and paint some church, do some painting, cut some grass. I mean, we noticed that. We noticed things that needed to be fixed. We noticed the grass that needed to be cut. But we were obedient to God's direction in that. And then at the end of that 2 weeks, one of the elders stood up and just was in tears. He said, for the first time, a group has come and has not tried to fix us. Mm-hmm. You have just stayed with us, and you laughed with us, you ate with us, and that was it. And so that was a really good eye-opener also for us and for a lot of our communities. And that has been our approach too in House It. When we've gone with Maya. Maya is really good in addressing that, and just being, not doing anything. And so I think that's has been really good. And I feel like for me personally, as I was thinking about this morning, the Great Commission, go and disciple all nation. And then I asked myself the question, how do you disciple all nation? And I get led to love your neighbor and love God. I feel like there's nothing there. God does the changing. My role is just to love God well and love my neighbor. And I think a lot of these First Nation communities, they do that really well. Like if you ever been to a house, you'll hear people on the radio saying, hey, I got 6 salmon, went fishing, who wants it? And there's always that thought of sharing. and been really challenged for that, because I know a lot of people, especially in this community. I think a couple of years ago we did a pig roast and just welcome ourselves to the neighborhood. And then I noticed a lot of neighbors introducing themselves. They've been here 13 years and they don't know the person across the road. And so I feel like a lot of our First Nation brothers actually have a lot of things to share to us than us sharing to them. If we only take the time to sit down and listen, we will actually hear a lot of spiritual, godly things in their lives already.
So good, Issy. I should see more pens moving here, people. This is good stuff. There we go. Wylam Sela. Oh, there we go. Taking notes. Issy, just one quick question. All the Pacific Islanders are talking about following protocol. Can you just in a few seconds tell us what does follow protocol mean? Like in Fiji, we'd make sevu sevu when we go to a new village. Are you just bringing Fijian sevu sevu into Canada, or do you do something else?
Yeah, I guess it really depends. I think it's also maybe an opportunity for you to ask God what you need to bring. I know with Lima, when there was the Forgiven Summit in Ottawa, we had island gifts like war clubs and everything. But then when we got there, we felt that we were supposed to buy a ribbon shirt and gift that to the youth. And so, yeah, I obviously in Fiji, you would bring cover, and the words that the chief would receive it and tell you is now you're part of this village, you can run around naked and nobody will do anything. That's the thought of being welcomed into, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mua. So you've been in the community here for a long time. You've hosted so many teams and people. Can you give us some hints from your experience? What are some good ways to come in? Give us some thoughts?
Yeah, I think, appreciate. I think some of it's already been mentioned by previous speaker, as AC was talking about too as well, how important. I just wanted to I think it's important to be fully aware that when we think about First Nations, Native, we all know across Canada have different people group. There are 100. And so we have to make sure that we don't assume that that everybody is the same and we do the same. So one other thing I normally do with team, I encourage them to do their own research. I mean, everything's online now. You can go in and find out a little bit of the people crew. I've Issy Man said, I love a house that we've been in contact with house for many years. I find it as a very comparing the Nutanos people to the Coshelis and Kwakwakiwa. These are three people group in Vancouver Islands. They're all different, and protocols are different, as well as how you engage. So I think it's a key important for us as YWAM'ers to have an idea which group are you going to and how you can be able to gain a little bit of an understanding. So I think it's in the Bible talk about the man of peace. That if that means a chief and council member, or could it mean that someone, a missionary, live there, work with those people that will assist in terms of how you be able to come in and effectively do ministry with the people. So which I have done in many years when we travel in different tribes. So simple stuff like I think. I just thought about too. I don't know how many of you have went through and aware. I think really aware of Truth and Reconciliation and 94 call to actions in terms of building relationship. That itself another way to think about. And I believe in my heart that within YWAM, this is what we do in terms of how do we build strong relationship and how do we start the conversation. And I think today we're starting. So going into the community, of course, protocol is a huge part of that, as we did with YWAM Victoria when we did the welcoming of the base. We got elders and some of our community were there to do the welcome, and that's incredible. That's very important that have been welcomed into the community, and the expectation from that is relationship to continue on. So I would normally, like right now, I'm using an example like Brother David at the team outcomes. I've been having a conversation with David in terms of encouraging him. Here is some resources. Here, some thought that you can look into, particularly focus here in Southern First Nations or here in Coachella. And here where I live, they are surrounded by five community, which is the Westanics people. And so I want the team to come, have a little bit of understanding of their history in terms of cultural, their food, some of the challenges that they faces in terms of residential school, all of that. I think it's important that we have a bit of understanding on that. And as you come in and we go through, I mean, ask anybody like Isiman said, I want to encourage you to come with open-minded. I think YWAM over so many years, I've led the team with YWAM. I've taken team in different places. The way we always do, we come in with a plan already set to go, and we follow through. Working with Indigenous people, First Nation, that's not always the case. We just have to be able to come in with the open mind, and as we go through, we learn our way. Just being engaged in the community. So I'd rather, if you come in for 2 weeks, if it is just sitting and having a conversation with elders and have tea or have coffee, that's always good. That's a perfect outreach. Just get to know the people, learn about the people. So that would be my my thought on that issue.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mo. We're coming to the end. Billy, I'm really excited to have you share for a moment here. You've been in Canada just about 3 years now, and in 3 years you've made really close relationships with several First Nations communities. Can you tell me a little bit about your connection with them? How have they received you? Like, what was your welcome like in First Nations communities, and how did you connect? I mean, a lot of us, I hope that we're being encouraged to make friendships with the different communities around us. You actually did it. How did you start from scratch and introduce yourself to the First Nations people and build? You've got about 2.5 minutes.
Thanks, Adam. No, it's been really incredible. I've got a good friend here that's working with me in Alejo, who's really been my man of peace. We've got in contact with one of the elders here, and he kind of invited us to come to the reserve for the First Nations to Nations, and we just came in as learners, as guests, and really just welcome us onto the land. Gave us a tour and just explained the history to us, and then at the end, with some of the Mexican indigenous people that was here for Nations to Nations. They did some music with some turtles and some all kinds of indigenous instruments, and that really ministered to the local people here. Mm-hmm. And at the end of our time, one of the elders just started crying and really had an encounter with God. And so through that, one of the elders got married, and he wanted a wedding, and he said, we wanted a Christian wedding. Mm-hmm. And so we had the opportunity to host the wedding at our YWAM Center with about 50 First Nations people that came to the wedding. So everything was of course Christian. We did worship, a pastor married them. And through that, we saw some incredible open doors where they invited us back onto the land. And last year, we got into the First Nations school also with Symphony of Hope, where they taught the kids the violin, and they actually taught them to play the Okanagan national anthem on the violin. Mm. And so that has gone throughout our region here. And actually yesterday we went to the school again, and the principal said the chief wants to have a video of them playing the anthem. We've been trying to get the chief on board. He's a really busy guy, but it seems there's now a seed that has been planted, and he seems to be on board for our next Nations to Nations. So yeah, we at the Oliver base here in the Okanagan has been really just going in as learners, and it's been incredible to see just the open doors that's been coming through when we had that attitude of just being open to learn.
And Billy, you're running another Nations to Nations gathering in May, or was it April?
It's the end of April, beginning of May. And so, I mean, this has been spreading now to the other tribe over the mountain. They said, please, we want to be part of this. And so they've invited us now to come over the mountain to also to have a Nations to Nations there. So it's incredible, just the trust that's been building, and it's kind of now like everybody wants to be part of this.
And so everybody on this call is invited to that. And it'd be a great way for them to come and learn, to see how different forms of protocol, to have a really wonderful introduction to First Nations hospitality, and to see how YWAM does it, especially your way, Nations to Nations. So everyone's invited, right?
Yeah, everybody's invited. Free accommodation, free conference. Come and be part of this.
So good. Yeah, that's really cool. I want to finish by asking Dan. I said earlier that I thought Dan would be pumping his fist in the air, like, yeah, this is what I was talking about. This is what I was trying to explain for 6 months. So, Dan, I'm quite curious, as you've heard these testimonies and stories, how has it been connecting with the Filipinos and the stuff that you've been presenting this last year? Where do you see the connections? Do you have any final thoughts to share with us?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, guys, thanks so much for sharing. It was so rich. I think this idea of protocol is so significant. It's something that came out in a lot of the interviews as I was talking with Indigenous and non-Indigenous friends or settler friends here in the Canadian context. Just the importance of honoring elders, honoring communities, and really making sure that we're coming places and entering places based on invitation. And it's not something necessarily new, although it feels very different for us, I think, as Westerners. But I mean, it says to enter into God's gates with thanksgiving and praise. There's protocols there. There's lots of protocol in regards to how we can connect with the Lord in the scriptures. And so there's something so significant for us to learn there about how we honor. But I guess one of the things that is just stirring in my heart as I'm hearing everyone share it and is just the humility with which different people came in. And I think, again, this idea of the philoxenia mentality is to just assume or to act as though we're strangers on earth. We're strangers wherever we go. And the idea is strangers is this idea of it's taking on rather a position of power instead of a position of power. It's taking on a position of humility, of listening, of learning, of reciprocity as well. So always assuming that we have something to receive and to learn as we go into different communities. And so I think as well for me, even, as we've done and engaged, as I've been learning about protocol as well in my own life, it's been really wonderful just to ask lots of questions. Over the years, if I have opportunity to go into a different Indigenous community, I'll often just ask different Indigenous friends of mine or people who I know have worked, hey, do you have any advice as I go? My friend Dave's given me lots of great advice. I grow like tobacco seed in my garden every year. And then I usually go and bring a little gift of tobacco and cedar and sage, just things I grow in my garden here from Quebec, and just go and bring them as a gift and just say thank you for having me here. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know you and to learning from you. And so I think so much of protocol is just really going out of our way to honor the cultures and the people that we're coming to. But to be able to do so, I think we need to kind of come in with that humble posture of being a servant, of being a learner, of being a guest, and just spending time with people as well. I think that was one of the other things I was hearing as well. I think about when Jesus was sending his disciples into different places, even Samaria, which would have been unfamiliar ground for many of them. He was saying, if people welcome you, stay there, stay with them, eat with them, spend life with them, share life in common with them. And I think that's just a really important thing for us to be able to do as well, is just to honor those relationships and continue not just using relationships for a means, but to actually continue to invest in those relationships as well.
So good.
And so those are just a few maybe little connection points I'm seeing, but I'm really grateful to have been able to listen to these wonderful stories.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us all the way from Senegal, Africa.
Yeah, happy to.
Yeah. Thanks. And I got to say, even in this conversation, our Pacific brothers and sisters and African, they were learning how to adapt to the white culture. They all gave very short, concise answers. If this was like a First Nations Islander African gathering, it would be about 5 hours long. There would be food and a lot more jokes. So they've even demonstrated Filipinos to give short answers to all of you. So they are
Adam,
adapting to culture. Vi?
Adam, can I just add one last thing in that? This is also part of the white culture I learned that I have to jump in.
Yes.
Sorry. The brothers have so eloquently shared, and I know all of you know, how to do this now, and we're still learning a lot as a family. But I was just speaking to the Waichoni, the Waichoni tribe in the U.S. about this. Just I know it seems sometimes this is the project or protocol, and sometimes we treat it as a project. But when we go to native tribes, because we see the world spiritually first, they're looking for the manifestation of the spiritual world through us. And that's why it's important to make sure that we walk in humility when we go in, as Moore and Issy and others, even our brother Dan has shared, love the humble spirit there. And so we have to really make sure, God, are we going in here just to fulfill our DTS requirements or our YWAM requirements? Or is this really a privilege you've given to us to walk in here and perhaps in your timing, in your way, give us the privilege of being able to somehow, by your grace, be part of the revelation of who you are to these people? And I told our Johnny tribe that the way we see the world as Indigenous people, when we see a tree, we're not like Westerners. We asked, what is a tree made of? And how does it function? That's very Western. When we see a tree, we ask ourselves the question, what is the meaning of this tree? What reality or what truth or is this tree trying to betray to me? So you've got a lot of native people who talk to trees and natives, and you think it's weird. Well, I can tell you a whole biblical worldview of how, that this is not new. The Bible was written for this particular worldview, and we're in the process of this whole document of the indigenous worldview and understanding the biblical text. And so I just want to say to you, that's why it's important when we go to native tribes, please, if you're just doing it as a project, don't do it. Do it because they will see, and I have done this with teams before. They go in there and the native people look, oh, they're just fulfilling their mission goals. And they know right away, and the native people are very smart intelligently. They're looking for, because we see creation, and including all of us, as a manifestation of spiritual reality. They are looking, are we manifesting the right spiritual, reality, or are we just doing this so we can enlarge our YWAM empire?
Yeah.
And it's important that we walk humbly in there. And like I said, we've been to reservations where they say we're not ready. Okay, let's back off. Just leave it. They'll be ready. So it's just making sure our spirits are in the right place when we go in, and the brothers that have spoken can tell you all about this, because the natives read you spiritually first. They don't read you materially like the typical Western mindset read you, and so they will turn off before we even. Are we a manifestation of higher truth and reality spiritually? So I just wanted to throw that in, because we're working on a lot of this theological stuff now with Indigenous worldview, and because the brothers can give you the whole. And Adam, you did amazing when you took us to your tribe up north, and
Mm.
we were just greatly humbled. Native people are some of the most amazing indigenous people in the world. We came as missionaries. They made us better people to this day. Even across America now, God is moving greatly. And we're just so humbled to be able to be part of such a great story. And you guys are all part of that. We wouldn't have been able to do it without you. Thank you. And we say in Hawaii, mahalo nui loa.
Thank you, Vi. Those are great words to finish on. I just want to say, Steph Minley, we were really hoping to have her, but she's traveling in Australia right now. And there's a couple of ladies from Samoa that have been working with First Nations in Saskatchewan, and incredible stories from them. But they are also traveling, so we did have some ladies lined up, but because of travel, they weren't here. Thank you so much, everybody. I saw people, a lot of smiles, a lot of people taking notes. So I'm going to hand it back over to John. But thank you to all the panel members. They live what they're talking about, and I encourage you to spend time with them and even invite yourself over to their house or just book a week with them just to see how they live it in person. Okay, Naka, thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for everybody, all the panel. We've got a real feast. Too much for us to take in, and so Graham has recorded this. The link will come out. You'll be able to watch, and then you can take notes. But as Adam said, connect with Issy or Billy or Va or Mua, and continue this discussion. And this doesn't, it doesn't end here. I'd like to introduce, just as I'm going to steal another couple of minutes, just as we conclude. I would like to introduce to you Emily, who is YWAM Dunham, and she is going to be with us for the next, I think, 3 upcoming Zoom times, and will be sharing something that is on her heart. And so, Emily, just give us an introduction, a taste, an appetizer into what we will then get to feast on for the next number of Zoom calls. To you, Emily.
Well, first of all, thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts and for welcoming me on this Zoom call. Yeah, how to make it brief. Basically, I have been doing member care for a number of years now here at YWAM Dunham. And I came up with a debrief plan for people transitioning out of YWAM. And I feel like God has been asking me to spread this around YWAM a bit more. So I was talking to Dan about it, and he put me in contact with John and the whole group that puts this together to give me a platform to talk about it. And so I have in my heart to just share about the importance of debrief, how to do it well, what it looks like, what it doesn't look like, talking about transitions, the many transitions that people go through in YWAM during their staff years, or as they move, as they do missions, as they welcome people from different cultures, as they transition to different seasons of their lives, from going from single to married to having kids. And then how as staff and leaders, as people that walk alongside people that go through debrief and transition, how can we help them do that better? So yeah, hopefully it'll be something that will feed you guys, but that's kind of my heart for you, to teach you and help you about debrief and transition particularly.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emily. We look forward to some more wonderful teaching coming out of YWAM Dunham. Hey, excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Wow. Guys, thank you for joining us. We could easily carry this discussion on for many more minutes, many hours. And so I invite you to initiate some conversation. Would love to be able to have the time to hear from Donna and Earl and others as to their experiences cross-culturally as well. So maybe we'll get you guys on another time to be able to share some more. But so good to have you, Adam and Emily. If you guys can just stay on as we conclude, which we're going to do now, and look forward to connecting with everyone else a month from now. Thank you, everyone. Blessings.